All right. So what we wanted to do was just do a little drumming, set the energy. You see my water over there, Jack? Is that mine on the ground right there?
Yours. I didn't bring mine.
No, mine's in here. I don't know where I put it. It's on the table. It's here. No, it's here. I brought it. It was in it. It might be on. Water? Yeah, if you can. Oh, there it is right there. Okay. I'll start with that one. All right. I want to welcome everybody. If it's your first time, I know most faces are familiar. I know it's kind of a last minute thing, so we tried to wait a little bit, see if more people would come. So we're just going to go ahead and start. It's kind of something we planned last minute. Kind of did it intentionally to see who's caught up in the Christmas stuff. Yeah. That's actually why we did it this weekend, to see who's really out there celebrating Christmas. We got a lot of part-time conscious people when it's convenient for them. So what we wanted to talk about, one thing I want to address real quick. Well, I got it on the video because I'm not going to address it in emails. I can't. I just ain't got the time. Obviously, everybody heard some of the recent news with Umar Johnson, so I want to be real quick on that. I got a bunch of emails yesterday and today. I checked today and I saw a bunch. I'm not really concerned with people's personal business. He's got time to produce the evidence. If people are not familiar, most of you should be familiar. You know, he's been trying to open this school and raise money, and there's in question his so-called academic credentials, which I really couldn't care about that. The money thing, I will suggest to people, you got to be careful when you're part of these groups and organizations that are collecting donations and money. This is my word of advice. I'm speaking in general, and I'm going to leave it at that. You shouldn't be giving people your money for long periods of time without seeing documented evidence or some proof of the progress that's being done. Now, if you keep giving people money and you've been doing it for X amount of time and never requesting, you have a right to know if you're donating money. And when that information is never produced and people are taking advantage of you, then I hate to say it, I don't really feel sorry for you. I don't really hold the person accountable that's doing it, because you know that old saying, if somebody kicks you when you're down, you let them do it second, third, and fourth time, they'll continue to do it. So all I can say is this: if he can't produce the evidence and the information comes out that he was ripping people off and things of that nature, then whatever he's got coming, he's got coming. If he can produce the evidence, then so be it. But the other thing we got to stop doing is giving people a pass because they've done something. We tend, and this has been going on in the news, you see, in Hollywood, entertainment, athletes, with all the sex scandals. It's everywhere now. It seems like every day somebody's getting accused. But we got to start looking at it in its totality. You got sexual deviants and criminals in every race. It don't matter what race it is. Stop using the excuse all the time when it's somebody black or somebody of another ethnicity that they're being set up. That's not always the case. It's bullshit. As much as we want to believe that, yeah, are there some of these people using this as a means to make money? Sure. Like the Bill Cosby case. I mean, the man's guilty as fuck. Now, there are some women that came forward and got caught out there lying because they were trying to concoct a scheme to get money. That's going to come with the territory. That's just how it is. But the thing is, it doesn't give anybody a right. I don't care what nationality, ethnicity, race you are. It gives nobody a right to molest innocent women and children. Nobody gets a pass for that. So let's be clear on that. If you agree, if you disagree, that's your opinion. I'm taking a stance on it. So the other thing we got to stop doing is straddle on the fence and take a clear stance on something. Stop being a fence straddler and trying to be neutral because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It is what it is. And it's funny to me how the Africa Bambaataa thing just went to the wayside. And a lot of us were members of Zulu Nation back in the day, when we were going back in the 70s and 80s. And the thing is, everybody knows that Bam was doing that shit. But the thing is, now all of a sudden, it's funny when you got money how shit disappears. And nobody's talking about it. And everybody was screaming for him to come before his own people and let us make the decision, and that never happened. That went into the wind. So we got to stop giving people a pass card because they contributed something to culture or whatever. That's great, but it doesn't give you the right to do whatever the fuck you want. That's just how it is. I take a stand on that. I'm speaking for myself because people have sent me emails. I will not sit down and respond to a bunch of emails about this. It's a waste of my time and energy. So I just wanted to put that out there. We need to spend more time worrying about ourselves first before we can save the world. That's what this class is about tonight: alchemy, coagulation, and transformation. The problem is we get so caught up in trying to be world saviors that our shit ain't right. I do use aggressive language, so I hope nobody gets offended. That's just the way I teach. Sorry. We have to focus on that right now, because everything that's going on is taking us away from that. Meaning, we can't set out on these projects to help everybody if we ain't right ourselves. Because we're trying to fight a war with no finances. We're trying to fight a war with no artillery and armory. You got another group of people out there, as I've said before, they're talking this militant stuff. Where's the army? Where's the military? Where's the weaponry? What are you fighting? You can't go to a gunfight with a butter knife. I keep telling people that. So you got to be careful. It sounds good, feeds off your emotions to get you pumped up, because it's a vehicle for you to vent your frustration. But when that's all said and done, remember, being on this path is not about how you react, it's how proactive you are. Because you can overreact. You understand? I said before, when all this crap started, going back, as recent as the Trayvon Martin case, this is what they want you to do. They want you to react. They want you to take it to the streets, to bring in that martial law, to bring in weaponry, to gun people down. You can't win that battle. I keep telling y'all, it starts spiritual first. You have to address the problems mentally and spiritually. Once that's addressed, everything starts to fall into place. You can't go on a war like that. It's just, it doesn't work. So alchemy and transformation, we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Hand me that bag right there. You guys know Brother Jack. He's with me a lot, Brother Mike.
Tonight's topic is alchemy, and
we're going to talk about alchemy in its correlation to the emerald tablets, some of the ancient Egyptian texts. We're going to get into some of the 7 principles of Tahuti. We're also going to get into a little bit of that. We ain't going to have time to get into it all, but we're going to do our best. Let's first start with coagulation. Anybody familiar with that? Anybody study that? Okay. Coagulation is a term that just means transforming from one state to another. It's really in reference to yourself. When you hear about the Philosopher's Stone, if you study alchemy, you hear that terminology a lot in some of the alchemical properties or principles of ancient Egypt. The Philosopher's Stone is you. All right. If anybody here ever traveled in a Masonic lodge? Anybody ever gone through a Masonic lodge? You can research it. I know you did. You can research this for yourself. What I'm about to tell you can find out on your own. I've said this before, when you walk into a Masonic lodge, when you look in the east, you're going to see 2 ashlars, one on the left, one on the right. One is rough, got a lot of imperfections, and one is smooth. When one makes the intent, and I'm speaking in Masonic terms right now, when one makes the intent to become a Mason, when they first enter the lodge, that's a reminder. You're coming in an imperfect, rough ashlar. And your objective is to become that smooth ashlar, to perfect yourself. The God that you're working on in real Masonry is yourself. You know this when you really start to go through the lodge, the mysteries, etc. There's a lot of alchemy principles in the Masonic rituals, degrees, and teachings. Because you're going to find out in all of these mystery schools, again, the thing that you're trying to perfect is yourself. In those lesser 3 degrees, okay? And we talked about this a little bit on the radio show this past Thursday night. The Jackin and the Boaz towels when you first set foot in the lodge, when you're coming out of the ante room to say, be taken around the lodge for your degrees, whatever degree it's on. In the first 3 degrees, the Jackin and Boaz, they take it back to the Bible, but it goes deeper than that. It's representative of when you look at it from an alchemical principle, it's representative of the masculine and feminine energies, which takes us back to the Baphomet symbol. Alchemy? Again, alchemy is, the technical term is turning lead-based metals, taking those and transforming to another state. But that's the literal terminology. But in spiritual terms, alchemy, the thing you're transforming again, is yourself. So it's just like when somebody says they're a Mason, like Masonry, there's the literal term, there's a occupation of a Mason or somebody that practices Masonry, and then there's the spiritual. So they call it speculative and operative. You'll hear that term. So we're talking about operative, okay? And we're all operative alchemists regardless of what spirituality we're practicing, because we're trying to evolve and change ourselves. That's the objective. That's why you study anything. You want to grow. You want to learn. And
so is it safe to say that alchemy is the process of raising the state of something to its higher.
Yes, constantly evolve. Yes, to get back to its quote unquote, if you want to say yes, its highest state.
Like lead to gold.
Right, that would be the literal terminology in ancient Egypt. They call it the concept of the philosopher's stone. Is what you'll see and read a lot about that, depending on what you're studying, what books you're picking up. There will be that connection. But the thing that we have to address first, in order to make that change, one thing that we were recently talking about was going into the chaos and the darkness. Now, I bring up the Baphomet symbol because in alchemy and the occult, there's a lot of misconceptions of the Baphomet symbol, especially amongst Latinos, blacks. We've been programmed to think that that's devil worship. We've been programmed to believe that it's exclusively, synonymous with what we know as modern day Satanism. Yes, they have grafted that symbol, but they use it in an entirely different way. Let's establish this. Baphomet, as I've said before, is not an actual deity. Okay, you can read all the paraphernalia you want on the Templars used to worship Baphomet in a temple. That's all conspiracy theories. Baphomet is just a symbol, and it's one of the highest represented occult symbols of alchemy because of what's represented on it. Okay, and again, we'll go over it real quick. I'm not going to stay on it too long. When you see the symbol of Baphomet, you see, as we said before, the goat face of a man. You see the breast of a female, right? I bring up the jacket and the Boaz because when you look at, I didn't bring the book, I wanted to actually put the picture up. You'll see the same representations, masculine and feminine. You'll see the representations of the four elements, earth, wind, air, fire, water. When you look on the Baphomet symbol, you see all of those symbols. You see the Kundalini rising. You see the flame, emitting from the forehead. You see him perched on the earth. Okay? What that represents is, again, as above, so below. And if you actually go pull up old pictures from a lot of these churches that still exist in the Northeast and in the Far East, you'll see, we all might have seen this picture we always used to see of Jesus sitting on the earth with one finger up, one finger down. It's one of the oldest, and it's in a lot of the old churches. That's the same symbol as Baphomet. You go look at the Baphomet picture and you superimpose it, it's the same symbol. That's not by accident, okay? They're trying to tell you something subliminally. It represents the same thing. Totality, equilibrium, masculine, feminine, as above, so below.
And it's kind of awkward. You see the connection between that, seven principles of Tahuti, and also the universal laws.
Mm-hmm.
It all ties in together.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to take that for account.
That's right. So what I'm going to do with the coagulation, since all of this is in reference to coagulation, we're gonna take a little excerpt. There's a book I would recommend people to read, and it's not mandatory, but it's a good book that'll link you into a lot of other good books.
One more definition before you move on. Philosopher's stone. What is that?
I'm gonna get into it in a minute. I just want to put this out here first. The Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation. The name of the author is Dennis William Huck. Okay. It's a book I would recommend. It's a good book for reference. And it has a lot of information we'll talk about. We'll get into the Philosopher's Stone, but Huck. H-A-U-C-K. I want to start with the coagulation first because I kind of want to stay in sequence. I don't want to jump all over the place because if we're jumping from place to place, we're not really getting anything accomplished. You got any more light?
I got you.
You got any more light over here? No, forget it. He's got a light here. Forget it. All right. This is a section in the book, and I'm just going to take this page and a half because it gives a good breakdown on coagulation, and then we can kind of go from there. This is chapter 17 on page 271, and it talks about coagulation, ultima materia of the soul. The last operation of alchemy is coagulation, in which the 7-step emerald formula, coming from the emerald tablets, which we'll get a little bit into that, salve coagula, which means dissolve and coagulate, is satisfied. The body is made spiritual, and the spirit is made corporal. Coagulation transcends both heaven and earth, and this is metaphorically, and produces a new incarnation that can survive in both realms. Okay, then I'm going to skip down here. So what is salve de coagula or coagulation? So we see it is, as we said earlier, when we were briefly discussing, It's about attaining the highest state one can spiritually, right? That's the goal. Regardless of what spiritual system you're coming through. Because the thing is, we might be coming through all different spiritual systems, but we all are trying to attain the same goal. What makes you not, or struggles you on that path, there's a term used in alchemy called making yourself less dense. What does making yourself less dense mean? It means all those things that are weighing you down mentally, emotionally, and spiritually keep you not attaining, quote unquote, your goal. Just bring it down a little bit. There you go. Yeah, just bring. No. Leave it where it is. But just bring the light. Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. We're so caught up in all these man-made religions. That keeps us very dense. It keeps us, when we talk about our pineal glands being calcified, not vibrating at its correct frequency, we can't receive the messages. Okay? We refer to it as neuromelanin, right? We hear this term neuromelanin, right? And we've had a couple of times, I always refer to when we've had dark light consciousness. Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum, I'm sorry, I drew a blank. We've had him on the show a couple of times, and I'd recommend you read his book too, Dark Light Consciousness by Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum. If you haven't read it, it's another book I suggest you definitely get and read. And he so elegantly breaks it down, and he talks about the source of this consciousness being the neuromelanin, which has its origin in the stem of the brain. And we have to understand the difference first and foremost between neuro and neuromelanin, as we talked about before many times in the past. Neuromelanin and neuromelanin is the physical skin pigmentation that manifests externally. It determines what level of melanin you're going to have, from very high yellow to sometimes pale, to brown skin, to dark skin, and to blue-black. And we have to understand, the darker you are, the more sun you need. It's not reversed. That's false information. The more, because when you are dark pigmented with neuromelanin, you burn and absorb more sun than somebody who's fair-skinned. Somebody that's very fair-skinned or light doesn't need to be out in the sun as much. They need to get just a minimum amount of sun because they don't burn it off as much. See, we're taught reverse. That's why certain ethnicities get burned by the sun, because they're intaking too much of the sun. But there's this misconception, and I noticed that from being down here. I used to trip out and see black people walking with umbrellas. Never understood that, when that's your best friend. And the problem with that is, if you're in the sun and it gets you sick and you feel like you're going to overheat, then you need to check your diet, because you're intaking a lot of toxins. Remember, anything that's artificial, anything that is not natural for melanin to absorb, it makes the individual feel sick. How do you know that? If anybody at some point in their life, I'm sure, whether they were younger, recently, or whatever, if you ever ate a heavy meal and went out into the heat, how does it make you feel? Don't make you feel too good. You feel weak. You can feel sick, especially if you eat something very heavy like excess meat, etc. That's a telltale sign that your body is telling you something is out of whack. You're not in sync.
Lay off the baloney, man.
Yeah. Now you got to know your body type and your blood type. That's a whole nother story, but we ain't going to get into all that, because then we're digressing from what we're talking about. But I'm bringing this up because this all deals with consciousness, evolution. All of that helps in the calcification process. When you're calcified, the pineal gland is not functioning. It's like putting a wall up in front of you, blocking you receiving those messages. Because your neuromelanin, when functioning correctly, links you in. It's like an antenna that links you into everything in the universe, every aspect of consciousness. When it's not vibrating or functioning correctly, it disconnects you, and you're susceptible. Now you vibrate at a lower frequency, or as we say, you become more dense, and you'll evolve and gravitate more on a carnal level. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, though, there is the fine balance between carnal or physical and the spiritual. You must, and we're going to get into that, you must indulge in your immortality, okay, to an extent to get to that state. So the other trick, or the other level of misinformation we get, is don't have anything to do with anything physical or materialistic in the world. That's not true. Okay? You live here on the earth, number one. Number two, You have to master this first before you can profess to be some spiritual guru. Everybody wants to be a guru. They levitate. They want to tell you about all their personal spiritual experiences. And that's the key. It's personal. That's great. But that should be a reflection in your physical. And I've said this before. If you are not successful in the physical, that's an imbalancement. Okay? Don't make you a bad person. It just means something's not right. Because we can't have all that. We can't be rich in all this knowledge and wisdom and be poor and broke. Okay? We've accepted somehow along the line that being in poverty is a spiritual thing. And that's the biggest, furthest garbage from the truth. So this path teaches you there's that fine line, and I don't want to even use the word balancement, of harmony, of being able to vibrate successfully in both realms, dimensions, and existence. It has to be. Because most of these philosophies and dogmas that are out there, they teach you. I mean, I know so many grown men that are, I mean, again, I don't want to offend nobody. I'm not saying that's the case for anybody in here. But I know so many grown men that are still living in their mom's basement. You know, but they're spiritual. They want to give you all this information on how you can heal yourself, and they speak with extraterrestrials and aliens. A lot of that is insecurities, because what happens is when most people cannot deal with everyday reality, they engross themselves in spiritual mysticism because it's a form of escapism. It makes them not have to deal with reality. And it gives them an excuse and a crutch of why they're not successful in the physical world. And that's because I'm so spiritual and deep, I'm not supposed to be. If you accept that, that's the tool and the formula for failure. Take it any way you want. Go ahead.
My question, how you define what is success? Being rich?
No, well, not just being success overall. What is success is being in harmony spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. It's got to be now that formula is going to vary from individual to individual, because some people might be lacking more in the physical or the finance. Some people might be very successful financially, but maybe their spirituality is not where it needs to be. So it's harmony, and we're going to get into that. It's harmony within all those parameters. You understand? So success is defined. The formula for every individual is going to have similarities, but it's not going to be exactly the same. You understand? So I'm saying that to say it all depends on the individual. The individual has to identify. I was talking about, which we're going to get into right now, the chaos and the darkness. In alchemy, one must go into the chaos and darkness first to understand what it is about themselves they need to work on. Because the chaos is what brings everything to the surface. Because it's easy for us to all identify our good qualities. Real simple. We all like to throw out there what we're good at. The hardest thing for us to admit is what we got to work on. The sad thing is some people think that they don't have anything wrong with them. That's the first problem. Right there, they lied to themselves. There's nobody walking this earth today that ain't got some shit that they need to fix and correct. And if you think that you don't, then you're really under an illusion. Because if you had it all figured out and you were that perfect, you would have no problems. You wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't be studying because you knew everything and you were perfect. The problem is we seek knowledge because we're striving to be perfect. We are not perfect. We recognize the fact of where we are in the scheme of things, and we're willing to go to length to do what we need to do to get there. That's different than walking around with a false ego and false pride, claiming I know everything. And this is the problem why we talk about this unification problem we've had for years. That's the problem for it. Because there's always one group or some individual that thinks they're the savior. And see, I told you, I left those savior groups years ago. I don't fuck with none of that no more. Any group that has one supreme leader over it, get out of it. That's my advice to you. If you're going to ask me, what do you think? Leave it as quick as you can. Because there's always some hustle coming around the corner. Trust me when I tell you. So this is a path of self-mastery. And people miss that word self. It's you doing the work, because in that process of alchemy or coagulation, your success and your failure, you can't blame it on nobody. If you're successful, take the credit. But if you fail, you got to take the credit for that too. There's no more blaming anybody for shit. There's no more. We always find. It's funny how every time something goes wrong, I'm not talking about us in here, I'm speaking in general, just so we're clear. It's so funny how when shit goes wrong, the first thing people want to do is point the finger externally, and they never take any responsibility themselves. Sometimes it's as simple as the bad decisions we make. That's it. We make a bad decision, it fails, and then we say, oh no, it went wrong because such and such set me up, or such and such was out to get me, blah, blah. Did you ever think maybe it was, you sensed that it was a bad decision, but you still went against that, and then it backfired on you? So in that process, you need to take some responsibility for that. I'm giving you that metaphor because that would be a concept of going into the chaos and the darkness. Analyzing yourself, your life, reflecting back for as far as you need to go, and to really analyze and do an inventory of yourself and look at some of the good things you did, and also be accountable for some of the bad things you did. And what are you going to do moving forward to make sure, one, to the best of your ability, it does not happen again. And you'll be able to recognize it when it comes over the horizon, and you'll be able to address it. But if you just pretend like there's nothing there, and I'm just going to join some spiritual group or become in some spiritual system, and it's going to make everything just go away, because now I'm a black Muslim, or I'm a Hebrew Israelite, and now I'm linked into some promise of pie in the sky and salvation, that all my bullshit's just going to disappear and go away. It's not. It's just going to boil and become more stronger and raise to the surface.
Sometimes, how do you know that you make a bad decision in joining something when you
Sometimes you're right. Sometimes
you want to just like I said, Mason. You went into the Mason.
right. It was
that a bad or a good decision?
It was good because no, hold on.
Yeah.
It was good because when I look back on it now from this point of what it represented, it was good in that sense. It was bad because of the politics and all the man-made control and all the structure, because it was still that platform of there's a leader and a hierarchy, and then there's the congregation shit. Just like every church, religion, or spiritual dogma has. That was the downfall of it.
I think it's good because you now know.
That's what I mean when I say now it's good. But he brings up a good point. How do you know you're not making a mistake? The beauty of it is you don't. Because that's part of the growing process. But the challenge is, say you decide to join, let's say, the Masonic Lodge. Yeah. Say at first what you read, this and that, you were excited. At that moment you made the decision that this was a good thing. Now, here's where you can break the chain. Say after being in it for a year or two, you start to recognize things that you don't like no more, that are not comfortable with your spirituality or whatever. Now, that's the moment you step back and go to something bigger and greater for yourself. Or you can just know that something's not right and stay in there and continually be suppressed. But that's an excellent question. It's not so much, we're all going to make decisions in our life not knowing. Yeah. That's the beauty. But there comes a point where you get into that, say this example that we're using, and you do sense and you do recognize something is wrong. So at that moment, if you don't make the change and you continue in it, that's what I mean. You take the responsibility for that.
And that's a very, very, very important, because, again, when we come to the principles of vibration, we are talking about whether it's right or wrong. Right. There is, everything is. It's just that we consider it in our day-to-day consciousness based on what society tells us. Right. That we determine, oh, this is right and this is wrong. But it's just, as we say, in varying degrees of vibration. And whatever choice you make is a choice that you have to make because you have to be there at that point in time. Now, as what Brother Mike was saying, is that when you get to the point where you see now it's working against you, that's where you step back. You say, well, okay, I think this is at the point where I need to either leave and go on to something greater. You know, so that's very important.
And why do we stay there? I've run into so many brothers, for an example. I know so many brothers, I go back to New York all the time, and they've been loyal members of the Nation of Islam for so many years. And the sad thing about it is when I ask them what keeps them there, they just feel like because they've been there so long that they just need to stay. So what is creating that control? And they see some of the inconsistencies in the information and the knowledge. And again, look, I'm all for anything that's making a person better. If it's making you better, power to you. I don't care what it is. Let's see what I say. But if it's stagnating your growth and there's no change and you're doing the same shit over and over, then you really need to analyze it. Go ahead, bro.
I'm listening, and things are stirring in my thought process. And it's apparent to me that in a society where mass mesmeration is practiced, it is impossible for people to know that they're under an influence. They think they're acting on their own volition.
To an extent, I would agree with that. But there is a level of awareness one can bring themselves to. Because this is just me.
How do you get, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
How do you get
what we're talking about now?
How you get that light on?
Right. How you get there is, one, first and foremost, you have to separate yourself from everything, quote unquote, like you're saying, that is conformist, that is mainstream. The hardest thing to break that way of thinking is most people are in these conformist structures, be it religion, politics, or society in general. Everything, quote unquote, is supposed to be a set way, and most people, if they go against it, they feel like they're going to be ostracized, or they feel like they're going to be, persecuted. I'm not just talking about physically. I'm talking on a mental level, on a spiritual level, meaning it's very hard for somebody, even in the so-called, quote unquote, conscious community, like you say. Many people think they're awake, but they're not.
Here's a simple thing. The money in your pockets ain't money. But I can't convince anybody to give me the money out of their pockets.
Oh, no.
Because they've been induced to believe in the value of this piece of paper that has no substance value. But the whole system, we all going to leave here Monday morning and go find some place to go make as much of that we can, because we got to pay the butcher, we got to pay the mechanic. So right, and I'm glad you bring that up, because see, now here's the thing. People will say that, they'll say we live in this society where technically, we know how the dollar works, we know how the economic system works, but like the key is, we're all in a society where, like you say, you got to pay the butcher, you got to pay rent, etc., mortgage. But the bottom line is this: you can't separate from that structure. One, if you're going to make that claim and you're not living, quote unquote, let's say, off the land and producing your own resources, you're still in that system. So the question we should be asking ourselves is, why do we recognize, I'm not talking about, again, us per se in here, I'm speaking in general. Why do we recognize it, but we continue to still go in this circle of nowhereness? So the level of awareness is there. It's not that we're not aware, but what's preventing us from taking the initiative to make a change? That's the question. That's why I said, so the level of awareness is there on some level, but there's something that keeps holding us back. Go ahead.
You made mention of if what you're doing makes you better, but those very words, how does one determine better?
See, now you got to factor in perception, because, see, truth is all about perception. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. It's how you perceive knowledge and information. Let me give you an example. See, people don't understand. When we talk, I don't have a problem with somebody, let's say, that's a Christian, right? They could be very spiritual, but say it reflects, it's making them a good person, it's making them successful to an extent. Now, their information may not be correct. I don't have a problem. I have a problem when they try to force it on another individual. And then there's a response or a rebuttal to that faith or belief system, and then disagreements take place. What I'm saying is, what that person might perceive as truth, you might come right behind it, and you have a higher level of wisdom that you can assimilate and dissect it. You understand? Because you're at that point.
Yes.
They're not at that point to perceive that. So what I'm saying, to break us free from these changes and not being able to, as the brother said, recognize the awareness, we have to separate ourselves from all these philosophies, ideologies, belief systems, and dogmas that say it has to be exclusively this way or no way at all. Because let's take the monotheistic person, be they a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew. Not all Christian Muslims and Jews are bad people. You have some very devout Muslim Christians and Jews that really take their faith seriously. They really carry it out in a productive and positive way. Then you have a more and more percentage of a bunch of knuckleheads. And then you have your fanatics. This comes with the territory. The problem is again, the levels of perception. Because how can so many people look at one religion, Christianity, perceive it so many different ways and create 1,000 different sects? They all claim to follow the same Jesus or God, But yet, you got Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecostals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, Baptists, when none of that shit is in the Bible anywhere. Their Jesus never referred to himself as any of them things. And the term Christian was an insult when you read the book of Acts 9:26. The disciples were first called Christians in Antioch as a mockery from the Romans. So Jesus never called himself a Christian either. But see, when you talk certain facts like that to certain people, they're going to get offended because the only understanding they have is what the Reverend Ripoff has programmed them to believe all these years. Because he went to a seminary school or some theology school and he's got some piece of paper that says he is sanctioned to be the sole authority on biblical studies, and he really doesn't know anything, or she doesn't know anything. So we got to stop, again, just because somebody stands behind a pulpit and calls themselves a preacher don't mean that what they're doing is right or they know what they're talking about. See, where I said the fear comes in, we're programmed not to question anybody. You understand that? Religious people don't question. They go sit in a church service.
Yes, because the system protects itself.
I wanted to make a comment. When we talk about betterment of self is always enshrined in your individual consciousness. Has nothing to do with how society perceive you as being a better person. But we, in our conscious mind, always hold on to the start string as though if I don't do it, they will not perceive us as improving, as not making some progress in life. But progress in life has to do with you, your own consciousness, perceiving yourself in a certain way and going out and working and doing the work. That's one of the things sometimes too we sometimes fail to acknowledge. We have to put in the work to be able to enable ourselves to get better within our own self-satisfaction and not the satisfaction of others. I think that sometimes we could get carried away just by the way we may want other people to view us. It has nothing to do with other people's perception. That's their opinion.
That's true. What I want to do before I forget, because I don't want to get sidetracked, I want to finish this section.
I had something to say
Sure.
to this brother right here. I just wanted to go back to a word that you used, which was resource or money. And what has come to me lately is this whole thing about focusing on source, which is really spirit.
How you doing, by the way? I'm sorry. You doing good? All right. Good.
You recognize me,
Oh,
right?
yeah, of course.
Okay.
That's why I was asking how you doing. It's been a minute. That's why I was asking.
I know. I'm studying metaphysical.
Okay, good. Go ahead. I
Christian metaphysical.
don't want to ruin your train of thought. Go ahead.
So what's come to me lately is this whole thing about source. Source is really
We're making an entrance,
Yeah, I know. that person can wait. Okay.
right? We're making an entrance.
So source is really where we get our needs met. Resource is a recyclement.
That's correct.
Money is
Source. That's correct.
It's recycled. So anything we have to go to man for is
That's
not
correct.
source.
That's correct.
I haven't worked in 2 months, but ask me, am I on the streets? No. Do I have housing? Yes. I have better food because I'm actually helping a food program right now than when I had when I was working.
So can I ask you, now that I haven't said that, and I'm glad you said that, you haven't been working for 2 months. So what's, not resources, what source, that's what I was saying earlier, if we're going to step out of that matrix, if you want to call it that,
Yes.
what, you don't have to give all of them, just briefly, like what source replaces some of those resources that people depend on? I mean, just give me one example. Again, you don't have to go through a whole bunch of them.
The one that's really helping me a lot right now is I'm helping with the food program, so I'm giving out food.
Right.
And so because of that, I'm getting that in trade
Gotcha.
for it's like a barter.
Barter
thing.
system, okay.
Barter system.
So the barter, and that's something that was done, I mean, that's a system that was done for so many years that we left.
And even contracting my services. I did that in DC. I only worked 3 days a week for 3 hours a day.
Nice.
And made enough. I made $500 as a dance teacher. So I just took
remember you
one
doing
thing
that.
I did
Right.
and I contracted my services. I didn't give them all. I wasn't enslaved
Of
to
course.
that company. I just did the one thing.
That's important, and I'm glad you said that.
See, now, here's an example of self-awareness.
Correct. No, go ahead.
Socially,
That is perfectly said.
in our social structure, we're not given leads as to how to establish
You're right.
finding, centering ourselves.
Correct.
Everything gets externalized.
Correct.
From the time we're small. Start with Santa Claus, Superman, Batman.
That's right.
All these
That's right.
external things that leads us away from understanding how to
Correct.
internalize the
Correct.
self.
And let me say this on that before. I want him to finish, and I want to get. But what you're saying and what the sister said is powerful because of this reason. You bring up the point earlier. So you sparked the thought. We're all good. People are. The problem is we got a lot of these conscious circles pointing out the problems. But the reason why I had asked the sister, like, can you just give us a quick example of a source, not a resource that you're using to replace the dependency on a resource? The problem is we all know the problem, and everybody talks about the problem. But like you're saying, the awareness, how do we go internally? And she just gave an example. She recognized what she was doing prior was just in that cycle that we were talking about earlier. And then she identified what the problem was and then made the adjustment.
Started giving.
Exactly.
Started giving
And-
from inside out.
And she's just naturally started to give back.
As opposed to living from the outside.
Correct.
Oh, thank you so much.
Correct.
And that's the transition that children need to be taught.
And they're not.
1, 2, 3 years old.
And they're not.
As they evolve into their structure as a participating adult.
Correct.
Because they learn what they live. Subsequently, we all live.
And we're responsible.
what we learn.
That's right. We're responsible as adults teaching them.
And so if this environment isn't where it's active, we find ourselves in these quagmires where we're living off of resources and we don't understand the concept of source.
Correct. And that's a good point. All right. So what I want to do, I want to finish this section here because it's kind of touched on a lot of the stuff we just touched on, but it's going to kind of open up more parameters. All right. So let's continue with coagulation, dissolution, and condensation. Kind of what we just talked about. Emptiness and form, unmanifest and manifest, implicate and explicate. This is perhaps the most powerful dialect of all. The typical Occidental one-sidedness, can you back up because of the light, Mike? One-sidedness tends to be on the coagular side of the equation. And the typical Oriental one-sidedness, or foreign, tends to be on the salve side. Okay? The self also coagulates. It produces questions that cannot be solved. We went over this the other night. Now watch this. Such as the questions of questions. Here's the question of questions. Who am I? Okay? We think we know the answer to that question. Ask yourself, who are you really? Again, I'm saying that not who you think you are, because most of us spend our entire lives professing and trying to convince other people who we think we are. There is the false illusion of self. Who you think you are, who you're convincing others to be, and who you actually are. The question is, who are you actually, or who am I, right? This is one of the first steps in understanding how coagulation works, right? Hold on one sec. I just want to get through this because if not, we're not going to get through it.
I'm trying to expound on what you're
Go ahead.
about. For instance, if I was to ask anyone in here to show me their ID, they would show me their driver's license.
Well, yeah, out of ignorance, and again, we're not talking about who you identify with physically.
But again, this is a question about identifying yourself.
Well, no. In the Philosopher's Stone or Alchemy, it's not asking you what you've been falsely identified as physically.
Well, that's if you know that.
Right. What we're talking about is if we're in this process, this train of thought. We're not talking about now somebody that's completely disillusioned. We're saying that somebody now has come to the threshold and they understand that there's more out there. They're not in that state no more. Now you're at the fork in the road. Now you realize at this point that pretty much everything you've been doing up until this point wasn't correct. It was, a lot of it was an illusion, etc. So now the question is, who am I? Okay? So this is what the Emerald Tablets or the Philosopher's Stone is saying. It goes on to say the infinite value, this is important, understand this. I want people to listen to this part closely. The infinite value of this question is in the ever-deepening asking of it, not in the solving of it. Everybody understand that?
Gotta keep asking yourself.
Wait, say that again, please.
Let me say it again. I want people to catch this. Because we get caught up in getting frustrated and trying to solve it. When watch. Let me read it again. I like this part because it's something you can really focus on. The infinite value of the question, meaning who am I, is not in the ever-deepening, is in the ever-deepening asking of it and not in solving it. All right? So,
Not the destination, it's the journey.
correct. Because sometimes we're trying to get from point A to Z and we're skipping everything in between.
Missing everything in between.
This is what it's saying.
Stop, smell the roses.
There you go. And you know, we live in a society in the world, we want everything quick. You know, when it comes to spirituality, that's why I always bring up these organizations or groups. Nobody can promise you salvation. If you're going to join something and they promise you some great return in the end, the only person that can do that for you is you. Once you understand that, the bonds of that mental indoctrination that weighs you down is lifted. And I'm telling you this from experience because I was part of those groups back in the day. I believe by being a part of some structured group or organization that down the road, over the horizon, we're doing all this and there's some great reward. How is that different from European Christianity or Arab Islam, where they teach you that there's this fictitious God character, be loyal, follow all the rules and regulations, do what you got to do, be a good boy and good girl, and guess what? You're going to get rewarded for it later. Well, this says when we deal with the now, that's why I said, you got to ask yourself, who am I? Are you that person? Or are you a person that realizes there's a bigger scheme of things? There's more. And again, this is a lifelong process. As long as we walk the earth physically, we're going to continue to make mistakes. But as long as we're growing from them mistakes, that's okay. When we're repeating the same mistakes over and over, then there's a disconnect there that we need to identify.
That's right.
And say, why do we keep doing this? Why does this keep happening?
The tree drops a fruit, the fruit dies, and it resurrects into another tree.
Correct.
So, from the seed,
Correct.
the fruit has the essence of the tree in it.
Right.
And when it falls from the tree,
Mhm.
and it deforms and
Right.
it dies, and through that dying process, new life is kindled.
Mhm.
So, I've been led to understand that everything you're teaching tonight and everything else that's going to be taught to me
Mhm.
in the next 30 years, I already know.
Correct.
It just hasn't been released out of my soul
That's
into
it.
my spirit.
That's it.
And typically it takes an event to trigger the release
Correct.
from that information out of my soul to bridge that gap into my spirit where it becomes
Mhm.
cognizable,
Correct.
conscious.
Correct. There's a term they use in many, we'll use the Egyptian mystery system. They use being in a state, they use the term you're a mummy, awake from your slumber or sleep. Through the course of your life as you spiritually go, like you say, everything is embedded in your conscious. It's just about, like you say, you use the term event. Something just needs to, again, remind you of what you already know. Whether if it's an incident, if it's an event, or if it's just simple as reading a book and that, boom, you get these goosebumps go off and like, man, that's what that is, blah, blah, blah. So yes, everything is embedded there. There's nothing new. It's just we've been in this mummy state. We fell asleep and we've forgotten these things. That's an excellent way to look at it. Now, you're constantly dying and resurrecting through your whole journey on this path of alchemy. Anytime let me give you an example. There's a death and resurrection. Let's say you were a Christian and you've now completely encountered some higher level of knowledge or consciousness, and you've officially put Christianity away in the back burner. It's now lived its life. It's dead. You've now died a death spiritually, and you've now resurrected and reborn, say you're now a Buddhist or whatever it is you are. Then you might go through the Buddhist state and got what you needed to get out of it. You felt like you've traveled the path long enough. Your soul is saying to you now, look, I don't feel like I can get anything more. I need to go in another direction. And let's say you encounter quantum physics and you put the Buddha thing down. Not that it's not there, not saying you can't draw upon. You're always going to have some of those principles and concepts that stay with you. The ones you outgrow, you just toss to the side. So now there's another death, another resurrection of life. Hold on one second. Let me finish this because we haven't gotten through this. But that's a good point with the death and resurrection, and we'll come back. So there's a constant life and death process at all times.
Why do all things have to sleep? Everything must sleep.
But
the trees sleep during the wintertime.
But in that sleep and stillness, there's growth.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's a death.
This is where the principle, when we talk about the principle of vibration, we say everything vibrates. Everything is always in constant
Movement.
vibration. And all of it tying again into the rhythm. Everything is always in constant. The pendulum moving back and forth, and our life has to always be going in that sort of pattern. May not be as quick as this brother or this other sister, but in your own conscious movement or your own conscious way of living, you are moving within your own vibrational level. So in terms of the sleep state, in terms of that, even in that moment, there is still a vibration.
But it's a form of dying.
Well, it's not.
But
And-
even in that
consciously
state,
you're out. Spiritually, it's still awake.
right.
yeah.
But consciously, you're out.
But in alchemy, in sleep and slumber, it goes back into the chaos. Remember, in that stillness, in that state, there's many different things that can happen in a sleep state. There's the ignorance factor, which is only one. Then there's the actual stillness. We can call it death in the sense that there's no progress, or the illusion that there's no progress. So when one is in that state of sleep or slumber, is their most powerful growth periods. They just don't recognize it.
Right.
When you're struggling or when you're asleep, when you're in a state of non-growth, all these can relate to the state of sleep. Now, we're not just talking about physically being asleep. We're talking about different levels of what that sleep or slumber represents. But sometimes people going through the worst trials and tribulations, it polishes them and makes them most strongest spiritual warriors. Because as long as they've used that process to grow and not look to use it as a crutch or play the blame game, etc., but recognize, look, I'm in a bad position right now. One, let me analyze why I'm in this bad position. Okay, part of it, I take responsibility for this. Part of it, I might have opened myself up to let other people take advantage of me, etc. This is the equation that alchemists would use to come up with a formula to how do they come up out of it. Uses in the beginning of this, I got you in one sec, the phoenix rising out of the ashes. That's an alchemical term. So you recognize you're that phoenix that was put to rest. Now how do I rise up out of this state of slumber or rise up out of the ashes and now polish myself and make myself right? What are you going to say, brother? And then I got to get back to this because I won't stay in this format.
Yes.
But go ahead.
But that is triggering all these questions.
No, I know. But once I get through this, then I'm done, and then we can flow. I kind of want to make sure we get through this little section.
So we have a lot of things that...
We read 2 paragraphs, and look at the dialogue. 2 paragraphs. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So we go through what we go through, and we have the slumber. And one can ask the question, why is it some people are sleeping and some people do not sleep? Or some people is constantly revolving. So, I am one of those people who choose to stop sleep. I remember Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he says, everyone, and he's the one who brought Hare Krishna to the United States.
Right,
India.
that's right. That's correct. That's correct.
He says, everyone needs to get to Godhead.
Godhead, great.
Yes. However, one can only get to Godhead if one possesses a deep desire to get to Godhead. So my question is, so do you want to get to Godhead or you don't want to get to Godhead? Why are you in such slumber? Why don't you want to get to Godhead as this is most important? Now, our next question comes to me. All of us have our own life path and our journey.
That's the key.
See, and that's where numerology come in, or one aspect of it, and then we have the Odu and all these things that tell you.
Correct,
So
correct.
I'm saying, while we go through what we go through at a particular time, are we supposed to go through that at that particular time?
Well, know this. You're where you're at in your life because one, and I'm not saying this from a cliche sense, you're at where you're at in your life because that's where you're supposed to be. What do I mean by that?
Yes.
Is what I mean.
Yes.
I don't say that in a mythological, faith, belief, religious sense. That's not what I mean. We're where we're at because of the decisions and the choices we make. It's that simple. You're doing what you're doing now, whether it's spiritually, physically, or financially. You might say no. Like, nobody forced you to do whatever it is you do for a living. You need to analyze the circumstances, what got you there. Whether you like what you do or not is not the issue. Because you could say, no, this is not by my choice. I don't like what I'm doing. That's not the question. Question is, I didn't ask you what you like what you're doing. The question is, do you accept the reality of where you're at in your life? I'm using that one example.
Yes.
You're there because you're supposed to be there because of the decisions and the choices you made. You understand? You could say, well, I was dealt a bad hand. But let's go even further. Why were you dealt a bad hand? What circumstances governed, quote unquote, why I was dealt a bad hand? But what I'm saying is there's a level of dimensions to that we can talk about for hours. But the point being is, again, step one, and that's part of going in this process of going into the chaos, because there's a saying in this spiritual path, out of chaos comes order, right?
Yes.
One must go into the chaos of their subconscious mind to understand what it is they need to do. And until they do that, you'll never be able to figure out questions like you're asking, right? You go back to the old Templar and Assassins. Matter of fact, the movie, The Assassin's Creed, that came out last year, right? There's a phrase they used in that movie, right? And it's something that we were using years ago. One must go in the darkness to do the work of the light. What does that mean? Right? I'll say it again. One must go into the darkness. See, we're always taught light. Every darkness, light, come into the light. Light and love. Light this, light that.
Yeah,
That's an
easy.
illusion.
That was
towards the pain.
Yep.
But that was easy. That was easy to work out for me. Simple. And God said, "Let there be light." From
Right,
what?
right. But for you, it was easy to work out. But the question is, you pose another point in your question. Why is it this? Why wouldn't some people want to become or raise themselves up to that Godhead? But the question you should be asking yourself, you're only saying that because you come to the realization that you have experienced that. So now you're looking at those people in a different perspective. But say you weren't striving, you'd be in the same mental state of mind that they were, and you wouldn't be looking at it like that. Which goes back to the same principle. You are where you are in your life because you choose to be. But the challenge is figuring out, why am I here? Which took us back to the original question. Who am I, right? The question of all questions. Who am I? You understand?
When we learn that, are we going to get our names? Our true names? At that
Your
point?
true name, remember this, your true name is not a physical name. Remember, the universes, and I won't say universe, because we know there's universe, many multiverses, whatever you want to call it. There's many different metaphysical and quantum physical concepts explaining it. Dr. Delbert Blair, who I was very close with before he passed away, I mean, probably broke it down more elegantly than I ever heard. And I don't care. Some people thought he might have been crazy. The man was, whether you, now I'm not going to validate all his extraterrestrial stuff. That's personal. You understand? But I do know the man was linked into something. You understand what I'm saying? And I only gravitated to what I can confirm for self. But on that note, I'm saying this. In that question that we're saying, who am I? Are we going to get our names? You ask a good question. You got to understand the whole universe is based on harmonics. Your name is not literally who you are or what you're really composed of. That secret of what they call it in the Egyptian mysteries, your sacred name. There's the given name, like what's your name people know you by?
Balance.
Okay, that's your given name, and the given name is who everybody knows you by. Then you have a spiritual name, right? That you might belong to an esoteric or a spiritual order, where only initiates in the temple know you by that name. Then there's your real name, your sacred name. You understand? This goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. Identify the three principles: who you spend your whole life, or who you want people to see you as. You took the name balance because it means something to you, right?
Yes.
And that's who you want people to see you as, to an extent.
Yes.
Then,
or to use that vibration to be really balanced.
but you're still trying to project. That's right. You're trying to project a certain image or consciousness or a persona about yourself.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying. This all ties in. But your real sacred name, you understand that when you make yourself less dense, you start vibrating at a higher frequency, right? And these harmonics, and that's why I said music is a powerful tool. It's one of the most powerful tools on the planet. Why do you think we always start with a drum session? Because the vibrations and the frequencies has its own language. When you go back to many different African cultures, we were able to communicate without even speaking. All we had to do was hit certain patterns and rhythm on the drums. We have one drum called the what? The talking drum, right?
Yes.
And we knew when it was hit a certain way, didn't even have to speak. We knew what message was being conveyed by playing the talking drum. How do we know that? We identified consciously with the vibration and the sound of the rhythm and the patterns. How do you know that that's true? I've done this before. I'm going to do it the same way, but a little bit different. Go back to your childhood to show you how powerful. Name a song you liked when you were growing up as a kid, when you were a young child, something in your youth. Any song that comes to mind. Or a song, it still can come on today. It don't matter how many times you hear it, right? It triggers a certain vibration in you. Give me one of your favorite songs.
Happy birthday.
Happy Birthday. Okay. The little actual song, Happy Birthday. All right. When you hear that song, what runs through your mind? Go ahead.
Yeah, when I went into the fridge, my mother was a baker, and I broke every cake.
You see what he's doing. Watch his eyes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going forward into time.
There you go.
Yeah, and
You went there because
Yeah.
what happens is when that question is asked,
yeah,
the eyes shift and you're actually now going where you just said you went there.
yeah.
You went through in time because when you hear the sound or the harmonic as a simple basic song as Happy Birthday, how can it take you so vastly to a place? So time is irrelevant. Part of breaking that cycle that we were talking about earlier, there is no such thing as time. Time is an illusion. Time is. You understand? What that basically means is, and we've talked about this a multitude of times, liken it to throwing rocks into a pond. Right? I used to say this years ago. When the rock hits the water, from the center of the rock, it ripples out. It's a ripple effect. So time is just constantly expanding. It is. When man tried to, categorize it and box it, this induced this cycle that we can't get out of because we're in this cycle where there's X amount of days in a year, X amount of days in a month, and then magically every 4 years they find somewhere to steal 24 hours. Where they get it from, I have no idea, which doesn't make sense. But even go to something basic. I told you guys before, years ago. I'm going back to the 80s. Look at the old second-hand clocks. The reason why they did away with that. When you look at the second-hand clocks, remember the old, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? That had the actual hand that went around. We used to see it in school. You look at it, couldn't wait till it got to the time. Well, remember, it goes tick, right?
Yeah.
Then there's a pause.
And it goes back.
Then it goes tock. But there's no time being calculated between the tick and the tock. This is an old quantum metaphysical theory. So what is real time? Part of breaking this cycle or illusion is understanding you have access to all of this at all times. Don't think because there's no such thing as past, there's no such thing as present, no such thing as future. You understand? That's all an illusion because you think, most of us, I'm not saying maybe I'll say it, we think that tomorrow's going to come. We automatically think we're going to get up and tomorrow is going to be here. Because this is how powerful we've been indoctrinated with time. Think about it. What if you go to sleep tonight and you don't get up tomorrow and tomorrow doesn't come?
And the clock is second. Where's the first?
This is what I'm saying. Where are the first? And they call it 60 seconds in a minute. Well, there's also 60 firsts that are not being calculated. Right? Albert Einstein brought this stuff up. All you got to do is go read Albert Einstein. What's the other dude? The Philadelphia experiment dude. I can't think of his name. He had the thing right here in Coral Castle. He was part of that whole movement. Edward Leeds Scanlon and them. Anyway, this is how they were able to create military systems, taking them off radar, not being seen, because they understood the false illusionary concept of time. So that plays an important part of how we perceive things incorrectly. That's an excellent question. So when your name, and I'm gonna get back to this, your true name, when you start vibrating at the correct frequency, where you understand what true love is, where you understand what true awareness is, the universe opens itself up to you. So it's not really a physical name, it's you become who you're supposed to become. That's who you really are. And it's more or less of a vibrational frequency.
So that's an unphysical name.
Correct. It's an unphysical name. That is correct.
Like Prince have a symbol for his name.
Correct. Right. And it went from that to that because apparently he had some type of growth mentally. We don't know exactly what it is. We can speculate.
Right.
But he went through some transformation. All right. All right. So. All right. Okay. This is we left off here. The alchemical philosophy of the secret which protects itself is simultaneously the identity of Salve de Coagula. Okay? In other words, only by totally embracing your mortality, my utter dissolution, can I attain immortality. Let me say that again. How does one reach these states we're talking about? How do you get to a state of immortality? It says you must embrace your mortality. This doesn't mean just become purely physical and become a heathen. It means you must master your mortality. You can't become an immortal if you don't master your mortalness. This is what I meant when I said earlier, people want to all of a sudden become a spiritual guru, a healer, and a levitator, and a mystic, and their life is in chaos, and it's a mess. This is what this is saying. It's that simple. So you must embrace your mortality. Embrace it, I'm sorry. The coagulation, the deep and relentless asking of the question, who am I, is not other than the solution of the question. The coagulized salt is not other than a dissolved salt. In a sense, evolution is the dynamic, intelligent harmony of Salve de Coagula. An ancient alchemical expression of the paradox is from one, listen to this now, from one towards the one by means of the one. Right? There's an old saying in Native American spirituality, all things are connected. That's why I just said a few minutes ago, you have access to all of this naturally. You're not disconnected from any of this. It's just when we take the initiative to accept false doctrines and dogmas, we disconnect from it automatically. When you exclusively say, let's say, I'm a Hebrew, you've just cut yourself off from creativity and everything else that exists in the universe because you got blinders on. You see things in tunnel vision only, and you believe in your mind, and you could believe in your mind it's right, but it doesn't mean it is. But it's the hardest individual to talk to is somebody that's 100% wrong. And you disconnect from everything. Now you don't have access to these resources that we're talking about. Because you made the conscious decision to say, I believe there's one God, and that God's name is Yahweh or Yahuwah. And anything outside of that now, you even program to the extent where you say to yourself, oh, that's blasphemous, or that's not right, or that's evil, or that's wrong. You've now accepted this dogma as the only reality to the truth that exists. And now you're disconnected.
So you create resistance to it and
strong resistance. All right, then the last part I want to finish and get into here. I hope everybody's understanding what coagulation and alchemy is about now. Hope they're getting a general idea. I would suggest, obviously, you continue to do your study and your research. I'm just trying to find a portion, a base groundwork, and I took it out of this section of this book because I think it opens up the doorway to a multitude of topics, and it is doing that, obviously. All right, then it goes on to say, the paradoxical expression contains the basic message of the Emerald Tablet, or the Emerald Tablets of Tahuti. There is only one from which all things proceed, and it's not talking about God. Watch this. Some call it God, okay? From which all things proceed, call it the one thing, the Mobius, river, the fountain of fountains, God, or whatever you want. Knowledge of this process, here's your answer from your earlier question, brother. Knowledge from this process is the Philosopher's Stone. That's why I didn't want to answer it earlier, because you caught that end part? Let me say it again. Because you had asked earlier, what is the Philosopher's Stone? I didn't want to answer it then, because then I knew by going through all this, that's why I kept saying, let me get through this.
I've heard a description
Sure, and there's many different.
I wanted to know which one we were.
And let me say it again. So this is what we're referring to in this context of the Philosopher's Stone, because there are many variations how it can be broken down. But let me say it again, in case we missed it. Call it the one thing, the Mobius River, the fountain of fountains, God, or whatever you want. Knowledge of this process is the Philosopher's Stone. So what we're saying basically in a nutshell is this whole process that we're talking about here is what the Philosopher's Stone is. What does the word philosophy mean? Philosophical. There can be many different breakdowns philosophically on a multitude of things. So the reason why we say Philosopher's Stone is because of Yahuda's question very early, if you remember, when he basically said, well, what is the formula or what is the process that somebody takes when they maybe recognize what we were talking about when something went wrong? Well, that's going to vary from individual to individual. So the process is not going to be identically the same for each individual. There will be similarities in that process, of course, but it's not going to be identical for every individual in this room. It's going to be different. Okay? All right. In alchemical language, Trogiani, which is a Latin term, it is facing up to the darkness of matter. Here, this is important here. Facing up to the darkness of matter, the darkness of death, and beyond that to the darkness which is in, watch this, which is darker than dark, which is none other than my truest self or source. See that? Let me say that again if you missed that. This is the key. If you missed anything, don't miss this. Let me say that again. And I'm only repeating it so it sinks in. This term means facing up to the darkness of matter, the physical, the darkness of death. Let's stop there with the darkness of death real quick. One thing that motivates most of us to get into some level of spirituality, more so maybe back in the day when we first came in, is the unknown of death, the fear of death. What really happens to an individual when they die? Bottom line is this: nobody really knows. I don't care what text you read. You can read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You can read the opening of the mouth ceremony, whatever. Yes, many cultures use many different theories of what they try to externally play out that the soul went through in the process. I get it. Because, again, it was man's insecurities that they needed something to grasp onto to remove that illusion of the fear of death. Bottom line is this: when you strip all that away, this is going into the dark of darkness, as it's saying in here, and you ask yourself, I got you in one sec, you ask yourself, what is really death? Do you really know? I'm not talking about your theory, what you studied, what you think it might be. When you remove all that away, I don't care if when we were younger we became a Muslim or whatever dogma or spirituality we studied, I guarantee you one of the core elements, I'm not saying the only, but one of the core elements of why you studied that spirituality, because you wanted to understand what death is. Be real with yourself. This is why we seek knowledge or studied spiritual doctrines, because we wanted to know the mysteries of death. What is death? And sometimes just the very fact, they use the word darkness because it is the unknown. What really happens to you when you die? What is the process? Am I still conscious? Am I aware? Do I feel like I feel now? Is it that type of consciousness? Is it a higher consciousness? Well, here's the problem with that. You can't understand something in a three-dimensional existence that's outside of that vibrates outside of that. Meaning, when that question is asked, in a conscious state physically as we are right now, we're going to give a definition that's defined by person, place, and thing. So when we ask the question, what is God? And say we had in a multitude of that room people that were from all different backgrounds and spiritual studies, we're probably going to get about 100 or more different definitions of what God is based on their experience, where they are in their studies, their evolution, and how they perceive that particular truth. So you can't really understand God and the Creator being confounded to a three-dimensional existence. Because we can sit here all night. I can say, let's be quiet for the next 30 minutes. And I want you to think of something that is not a person, place, or thing. You would get a goddamn headache trying to figure that out. You would sit here struggling. You'd be thinking hard. You'd be focusing on more, trying to figure out what can I think of that it's not, than actually just letting yourself go, clearing your mind, speeding up your vibrational frequency, and astrally traveling and leaving your body to figure out the answer to that question. The mistake would be sitting there trying to think so hard and figure out, what can I think of? You'll never get the answer to that if you're still thinking in a three-dimensional mind state. You do have the ability to speed up your vibration and frequency and astrally travel. As bizarre as it may seem, it can be attained. It just takes discipline, practice, and study. And then when you're in that state, you're not confounded and confined to things that bind you here. Then the universe opens itself up to you. This is called the process of making yourself less dense. Now, you don't ask the question, you what? You become the question. See the difference of asking and becoming is two different things. See, you're looking, they call it putting on, in a lot of occult circles, they call it putting on the deific mask of God, right? In a lot of occult rituals, you'll see that there are deific masks put on. If there's a ritual of Tahuti, there's a mask of Tahuti worn. There's a reason for this, because when you are evoking as opposed to invoking, evoking an archetype energy is becoming and embodying that aspect of deity. Invoking is when you're making an external declaration. You're invoking the consciousness of, if you're doing an invocation, say to Anubis, or to Huti, or an invocation to Shango, or Batala, or Yemaya, or Oshun, whatever. Know the difference, too, of invocation and evocation in your spiritual practice. Because it accesses two different portions of your psyche. And people get lost in this sometimes. Because how they get lost in it is, because when it's said here, sometimes the biggest mistake an individual makes is, by naming God, they create what? Other gods. That's where the chaos and the confusion starts. The very fact that you have to name a God and not understand that you are a God and what God really is, and I'm just using the term God, is where the confusion comes in. Go ahead, bro.
Okay, so a question. Why is it we have auto amnesia when we come to Earth in the physical? Thank you, madam. Yeah, why we have auto amnesia?
All right. Now you're opening up a can that I'm not going to get too much into, because now we're talking about past lives and reincarnation.
Yeah, I asked that question based on a statement you just made. You said no one really knows what happens when we die.
Correct.
Okay, so all right, so.
But know this: in the laws of spirituality and reincarnation, you carry past things from previous lives into this life. What do I mean by that? Let me tell you what I mean by that real quick.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have these moments, we call it deja vu. We feel like we've been somewhere before, or you felt like you meet an individual, like I've seen this person before, or you have some odd spiritual experience, etc. Now, there's ways of accessing past lives and things you experienced. But as that familiarity process, like I said, the awareness of death, I made the statement on the whole. I can only speak for myself. And I'm not saying this because I'm placing myself outside that box. I have a general idea of what happens to you at the time of death. That's why I'm saying that. But I can't make that statement and you accept it, because then I'd be starting a whole nother religion. Because if Mike says that statement and I go, I believe you, Mike, without having that experience myself, I just became part of the religion of Mike. So I can't make that statement. I'm speaking in it in a totality sense. I do have a general understanding because I've experienced it myself. But I'm not going to convince anybody in this room of a personal experience, because then we start getting sidetracked. The objective is for you to have your own experience. Now, how did I come to that conclusion? Dealing with past life existence, reincarnations, and being able to go back to them points of dying. Let me give an example. And again, I don't want to get too bizarre, because I don't like to get all out there with the space cadet shit, because anybody knows me, that's not me. I confirmed in one past life existence that I fought in the Crusades. And I identified an aspect of myself that was one of those soldiers in the Crusades. Actually took myself to that time, fighting in particular wars, and took myself back to the point where I was killed in the battlefield. I have a whole shrine set up to this particular entity that I work with. And again, I don't want to go too bizarre, because I don't want people to accept that and hear me say that unless you have your own, come to the realization of your own experience. You understand what I'm saying? Go ahead.
My own experience. When I was in my mother's womb, I don't recall.
Correct.
I asked myself, was I dead? Because I tend to equate being alive what I can recall.
Right.
So, in the womb of your mother, when you were 3 months old, were you conscious or unconscious?
You were conscious, and let's even go.
And what kind of consciousness was that? So, to the question is the darkness of death, or the unknown about dying.
Right.
I believe we have that information.
Correct.
Again, it's embedded in our soul, and upon the appropriate event for each one of us, that information will surface into our spirit, where we'll become cognizant of it, conscious of it. Why I'm saying that when we're in the womb of our mothers, we have a different kind of consciousness, not the kind that we understand.
No, not now.
Now.
Correct.
So, prior to coming into our mother's womb, we had a other consciousness.
Correct.
So, after we leave this dispensation or this flesh realm, we're going to have a consciousness that's different to this.
Correct.
So, the darkness of death, or the unknown about dying, is something that you have to bring yourself to understand the consciousness you had in your mother's womb to understand dying.
And know this, that's a good point. There's two things. Now, some of this, you have to bring yourself to the self-realization of it. Why do we keep coming back here and reincarnating from those states, right? Is you must keep coming here till you reach that quote-unquote state of perfection. You keep coming back here until you master everything that you keep getting wrong. Let me say what I mean about that real quick. Let me back up to something he said. Okay? Let's not get it twisted, because life is death and death is life. The darkness is actually the life. What we term as life, the moment we emerge from the womb of the female, we start to die. Because the older you get, what we consider living, we become, as we get older physically, we become closer to death. Now, the problem is we don't understand at what age are we going to face what we call physical death. So when we were in the state of that, we used the term earlier, in your mother's womb, which was a different state of consciousness, right? Which was really a higher form of consciousness or living, right? And then even go back prior to the formation of you in the womb, when you weren't physical, that was even a higher state of consciousness or living. But here's the key. All of that happened in the darkness. You understand? All of that took place because in the womb, right? When you go back into the story of the chaotic waters of Nun. What is Nun and what is the chaotic waters? Well, what that's talking about is when the sperm is ejaculated into the female and all the sperms rush to the ovum so one can make it and life is given. They call it the chaotic waters of Nun. And in that chaos and darkness is where this takes place. So this is why, again, in Alchemy, when it talks about the chaos and the darkness, and even when you go to modern day religion, right, God was in his perfect state when he was what? In darkness. Because the very first statement in the very few verses of the Bible is what? And God said, let there be light, which is confirmation that God was in darkness. And because it said his spirit roamed upon the deep and void of the earth. There's many different translations of it. But the point being is, God emerged from darkness. So darkness can't be that bad. So we could correlate this metaphorically to a whole bunch of different concepts. And this is what remember we're saying, the philosopher's stone, where we're using a lot of philosophical knowledge. And again, all of it is right. There's no such thing as right or wrong. Remember, it's about perception and perceiving, because we're all going to perceive things differently. So how we perceive things is our personal truth. Okay? And that can change. Go ahead.
This summer, because I'm doing some metaphysical studies,
Right.
I was writing about this, your question. And I really went into meditation about it, just about my own.
Right.
And what I believe is that I have a divine mission, and that I selected that mission before coming to this plane. Okay?
Hold that page
And the
right
reason why I could not remember
Let's go get a
that
shot of
mission
people.
is I had to experience the human aspect of it. Yes. And experience that in order to help heal others. And I call it cracking the code of the Sacred Heart. So that's something, I know that my mission is about forgiveness and love, and unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness. But I could not heal anybody unless I experienced the pain of being a victim.
I'm just taking a shot of it.
Quote unquote.
Just taking a shot, everybody. That's
Oh, okay. So
I got warrants.
I could not remember those things because then
Got
I
warrants,
wouldn't
bitch.
go through the human experience and be able to help other humans or other spirits. So that's what I believe, and that's what I wrote about.
Or maybe it's just an experience that you need to develop, so you find your way back to non-physical.
Exactly. Exactly. By understanding that and accepting that and knowing that's part of the journey, that nobody victimized me, that this was an agreement that I
Say that again. Back up. Nobody what?
Nobody victimized me.
Thank you.
That's it.
That was an agreement that I made, and it was a wake-up call, and I've had to have it several times.
Okay, so are you finished?
I'm done.
Okay, so all right. Are you familiar with the corrupt demiurge?
The corrupt what?
Corrupt demiurge.
No.
Okay, so you make a statement, okay, that we keep coming back. According to the corrupt demiurge, okay, we did not come back on our own. We were tricked into believing that by seeking the light, these non-physical energy out there that doesn't vibrate in collaboration with the natural integral laws of creation, trick us into coming here because they feed from us. And what they're saying is that this is why we feel so drained in the mornings when we wake up from our slumber, because something is sucking us. And when we watch the Matrix, that's what they show us. Something is always sucking on us.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't use the term "we're tricked." I would probably not fully agree with that part. What you just described, I mean, I've heard something similar. Didn't know that's what it was called. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves: if we're being tricked, what disposition are we putting ourselves in to allow us to be tricked? Because on this path, you got to understand this: you only can be harmed, affected, deceived, unless you open yourself up to it. Let me give you an example. I'm initiated in Voodoo and Palo. And I know how that's got to work is, first and foremost, the person that you're dealing with has to accept it as a reality first. It's all mental. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm telling you this from fact. Now, I agree with what you're saying, yes. So we're only being tricked because what disposition are we putting ourselves in that's allowing us to be deceived? So that also ties into what I was saying earlier. It still ties into the point, so we must still come back here until we're not in that state where we're able to be deceived, because that would still tie into that concept, because obviously there's something we're still not learning, so we keep coming back here, whether it's through deception or trickery, if we want to use that. But when we vibrated past that, let's say, then there's no need to return here no more. So then we're past that state of trickery and illusion. Now, you're talking also about those spiritual forces. It's also known in other circles as specters. Okay? And specters are spiritual energies that suck the life out of you. You also probably heard of incubus, which do it sexually. A lot of females have, dream experiences where they feel like spiritual entities are having sex with them while they sleep. That's a form of specters. Specters are able, the reason why, how the trickery or the false light, how we get tricked to keep coming back here is they have the ability to read They have telepathic ability to read your subconscious mind. So they understand your weaknesses. So this is why I'm saying, yes, we can look at it as we're being tricked on the surface, yes. But we're disconnecting because we're opening ourselves up and allowing it. Now, I can only say that again based on my experience. Now, you're right. As a whole, that might apply to a large group, and I'm not in disagreement with that. I would be in disagreement with myself for the term trickery, and I do. When you're saying wake up in the morning, here's the funny thing. That drainage feeling are those type of energies. But I immediately know when I wake up feeling like that, like you should know right off the bat when you wake up, it's not normal to feel drained after you wake up. So you can, there's certain things you can do to identify why you are drained. I'll literally go through points where if I feel like somebody's doing work on me, that attentive ear kicks in. You understand? I was giving you little examples. But so yes, I'm in agreement with what you're saying, but I'm more focused on how we continuously tricked and why are we being tricked.
Just want to add a little bit in regards to the corrupt them earth. So Cameron Day, who is studying this thing, he says one can free themselves from the agreements that we make with these non-physical beings. So he says that you do it in your dream state.
Okay.
You go to them and tell them you do not want this agreement anymore.
I agree.
Then they release you.
And I'm glad you bring the dreams up because that's a tool I work with all the time.
Yeah.
One thing your powerful tool is if you want to, let's say, you can use the term astrally travel, or if you want an answer or communication to a problem, it's very powerful to do something similar to what you just said. And that's very effective. And once you, because what it does is, whether you're conscious of it or not, it prints a certain groove in the subconscious mind. You've already prepped the mind before you lay down and go to sleep.
Yes.
That's a powerful tool
Yes.
because most of us, one simple thing that people should practice consistently, we don't analyze and focus on our day and give contemplation and reflection to it before we go to sleep. The worst thing you can do is just go straight to the bed without getting the body and the biorhythms in the correct state before you actually lay down. Because what tends to happen is all the confusion can rush to the surface, and this is what opens yourself up to what you mentioned earlier about, let's say, possibly being tricked or drained. So what I will do, and I'm glad you bring that up, that's a powerful tool. What I'll do is I'll do that contemplation, reflection, whether it's for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5, it don't matter. And if there's a specific answer you need for a question, you can, like you say, if you want to break a contract or you need something clarified, right? You'll find, especially if you lay flat on your back, your chakras are always aligned. It opens you up.
I am observing this thing is happening on the physical as well. A police officer, he pulls you over. He asks you, first thing he asks you for is your driver's license. He wants to know the contract that he has with you or you have with him. He wants to know if he has the jurisdiction over you to do to you what you have agreed to, whether it being done wittingly or unwittingly. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Profoundly so.
Yes.
Profoundly so. We live in a structure of commercial jurisdiction. We're born into jurisdictions that are governed by commerce.
Yeah.
Commerce is the basis of contracts between entities or parties. So yes, and if you, for instance, I've just released myself from that state.
Yes.
I renewed my passport and I chose to use the address that they asked for, the mailing address, as rule-free delivery. And I used 5 zeros for the zip code. They gave me a passport under the premise that I'm now a non-citizen national, not a U.S. citizen. So I'm out from underneath that contract.
Powerful.
And the passport, when you get the card with the passport, and police officers ask you for your driver's license, you say, I don't carry a driver's license for identification. Here's my passport. You give him the passport card, he goes and he runs it. There's a flag on the passport and the data that says, do not stop, do not detain, do not interrogate. Lifetime concealed weapons permit. And all he can do is come back to you, give you back the card, and tell you, bid you to have a good day.
He's been instructed.
And that's acquiring what we would recognize as diplomatic immunity. And it has to do with contract. I wanted to expound on the dream state, the death, darkness, in terms of relating to it as various planes. I'm led to believe, I don't know, but I'm led to believe that we were never dead.
That's correct. That's now, yeah.
And we never die.
Only physically. We never die spiritually.
Right.
Well, you can't destroy energy. You can't destroy consciousness.
Our prior existence before arriving in our mother's womb was spiritual.
Correct. That never dies.
That is a constant.
Correct.
Except if you defile the constant in its presence, then it's taken away from you. It's not rewarded to you. It is demerited to you, and you lose that constant. That's when the spirit dies, and no physical realm can affect that. That happens in the spiritual.
Correct.
So this is what this concept of everlasting life and
all those
yada
things.
yada. This is where that is born from.
That's correct.
But you were existing alive eons before you wind up in your mother's womb.
You know.
So you find yourself swapping planes.
Correct.
You leave from that plane and you come into this plane.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come out of this plane, you go back to that plane.
To add to
And
what
then
you're saying.
You come back, you're swapping planes.
To add to what you're saying, our ancestors, through the Adinkra symbols, they gave us one of the symbols, and it is known as Nyami Nwu Namawu. What that says, being translated into English, is that God lives and cannot die, and so is I. Yeah, it is a symbol that looks like an X with circles around the end of the X.
Well, Balaam's donkey talked to Balaam, and Balaam freaked. And see, this is the trick on man, that this ability to talk. See, the language, we think English, Spanish, German, Italian, or even, the African languages are our pathway into the understanding of this. And I've been led to believe, I don't know, that it is beyond language. This is things that occur in the substance of your DNA, at your most finite existence, your atoms. This is something that's way inside that doesn't take language. It evolves and surfaces based upon experiences. Some people have unique experiences. I can tell you, I was sitting here in this yard and I saw a UFO fly over this house. I swear to you, one sitting right here in this yard.
But anyway, let me say this real quick because we're almost running out of time. I mean, bring up good points. Both bring up good points, and I do believe it is. This is my thing with the language thing, real quick. I just wanted to touch on that. I got 3 more lines I want to finish in here. When dealing with spirit or consciousness, it's just my experience. Not saying that language and certain aspects of culture isn't important. It is, because it speaks in different volumes. But the spirit and consciousness can supersede beyond. I believe if you're connected, to me, it don't matter what language it is. I used to be in that frame of mind because I was a heavy study of Semitic languages. I was. And I used to believe that you really couldn't understand certain things in not understanding a certain culture or language, and it's true to an extent. But I found out once you raise your vibration, your frequency, that's really null and void. And again, I can only say that. But what you're saying when you broke down the term, the concept of what it is and what it represents, that's how I agree with that 100%. Because it's powerful in what it represents. But real quick, before we run out of time, I only got a couple more lines in here, and then we've actually finished this portion. All right, so we left off with the darkness, and good points there with the different planes, etc. And this is what this is going to kind of talk about. You never die you never die spiritually, but you will experience many physical deaths. Now, you do die. When I said earlier about a spiritual death, it is spiritual in the sense, like if you leave one dogma or state of consciousness and go to another, that's symbolic of a death. We say a spiritual death in the physical form because it's only because it's a spiritual experience, right? Watch. I just want to finish with these last couple lines. All right, so we talked about the darkness and the darkest dark, etc. Here's the key. Now, remember what I said in the very beginning about the rough ashlar and the smooth ashlar. Everybody remember that?
Yeah.
All right, this is what it's going to finish up with. There's a method to the madness. Okay. So we're saying that the darkness of the dark, all these things we're talking about, is none other than my truest self or source. That's where we left off. Then it goes on to finish what could just as well be described as boundless and infinite light or intellect. So the difference between the lowest state, pay attention now, the lowest state of consciousness in alchemy and the highest is like the difference between a soft black coal and a hard clear diamond. Get that? So all we're discussing here is the varying degrees of vibration, and it's all the same thing. Because remember, you got to back up. It said it's about from one to the one that is the one. So what we're basically saying, it's all connected. It's all coming from quote unquote the same source, but we're just getting varying degrees of vibration of it. That's what the Philosopher's Stone is. That's why I said a few minutes ago, everything we're talking about, everything that everybody's inputting is where they're at in their evolution, and it's correct. We don't look at anything as being right or wrong. You understand that? Because those are just varying degrees of vibration. That's it. Because what I might think is right, you might look at it and say, I don't agree. I think that's wrong. But you're perceiving it like that. Let me give you an example. I use this. We might walk out front and two guys are fighting. Right? And the one guy that's on top of the other guy pummeling him, the mind is automatically programmed to think that the victim is the guy that's laying on the floor getting pummeled. Because we perceive it that way. But we may not have known that the guy laying on the floor getting pummeled might have tried to rob or kill that guy or harm or do some type of damage in some shape, form, or fashion. So I use the perception thing. The mind automatically will perceive what it wants to perceive in the way it wants to perceive it. So we automatically think we're going to rush to the rescue to break it up because we think the guy on the floor is the victim because he's getting pummeled, but we don't really know that. We're going to use our perception level is going to kick in to determine. Another way we might perceive it is we just want to break up a fight and we don't want nobody to get hurt. And then we might find out what really happened.
And then you want to
there you go. That's what I'm saying. Because we don't know. This is what I'm saying. I'm just using that metaphor.
That's why I like to use the like to believe.
Correct.
Because you don't know, but things will lead you to believe.
Correct.
Based upon their presentation.
That's correct.
Based upon the experience.
Correct.
So if you're not churning to be aware of, well, I don't want to be led to believe anything because I may be led to believe the wrong thing. So now I have to exercise analytical strengths. And what is there to analyze? Well, the elements of the experience.
That's correct.
Each element has a telltale signature. And as you identify these elements, it brings you to a place where now you can make an assessment as to, okay, this is this. This isn't that. This is not something I want to get involved with.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to touch on tonight is that when you find yourself, and speaking for myself, desiring to be other than how you find yourself. You know, we wake up one morning and say, you know, I'm not happy with my life. I've done this, I've spent 30 years doing that, and I'm not happy with myself. This is I believe, been led to believe, that this is the inner core of yourself beginning to shed the things that's binding it. And this teaching helps you to recognize that.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And it happens. It may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen next year, it may have already happened.
Right.
You come to a place, you may not have woke up that morning, but something happens to you, and then you walk away from it and say, you know what? I'm sick of this. I don't want to be in. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this space no more. I want to metamorphosize myself out of here into another state. And you start looking for the avenues. You start looking for the pathways to do that.
Correct.
Now, this philosopher's stone. The reason why I asked what the definition was, because you started the conversation using the word alchemy. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I asked for definition so I can
Right.
understand
And
where we were talking about.
right, and then both of those terms. That's why I went through the
Alchemy and
material.
philosopher's
They're
stone
connected.
Has a big
Correct.
connotation.
Big.
The
Yes.
alchemists are using the concept of the philosopher's stone, desired to transmute lead into gold,
Mm-hmm.
as the philosopher's stone was transmuted, which the philosopher's stone, according to the legend, is edible powdered gold,
Right. Monatomic gold. Correct.
monatomic gold.
Right. And that process was used, and that's also a part of the alchemy, because there is a aspect in the Egyptian culture where they'd actually, ingested what they called liquid gold, using that same alchemical process, because they believed that ingesting that monatomic gold, it made themselves less dense.
There's a claim that when this process is achieved, the vessel that the gold was sitting in, as it is transmuted into the philosopher's stone,
Right.
the plate or the pan acquires zero gravity.
Correct. That's correct. And this is, again, when you go back to the monatomic gold, when we say zero gravity, it's going back into becoming less dense. Anything that's weighing us down, we can't inject. When dealing with the monatomic gold or liquid gold, there's many different variations of it. When one is too dense, they're not able to absorb or reap the benefits of that process. So that's definitely what that would refer to. I know you had something real quick before we close. We're going to finish up, and then if anybody else in the back, and then we'll close.
I was going to ask
But that's
you,
a good point.
pretty much your thoughts on, we're going from, in the end it says from soft coal to diamond, right?
Say it again.
It said from soft coal to a diamond.
Yeah,
So obviously it's a
a
process.
smooth diamond.
To a smooth diamond, it's
Yeah.
a transformation,
and that's a metaphor. Yeah.
right? So what do you think does rituals and the subconscious mind come to play in that process? Taking the process to the will to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now remember, rituals in this path is important, because rituals is part of the transformation process. One, if you're working a ritual in any spiritual system, you always have to ask yourself, one, what is the purpose of the ritual? Two, why am I doing it? And three, what is the outcome I'm trying to obtain? As long as you got concrete explanations and answers for that, then it's going to create that transformation process. Now, if you're just doing ritualistic practices in vain, just because it's ritualistic or it makes you feel spiritual, but there's no, motive, or there's no intent for it, and there's no goal or outcome to achieve, then it becomes pointless. You understand? Now, the problem is, unfortunately, in some groups like Masonry, there's a redundancy where things are done over and over, and after a while, it just doesn't serve a purpose anymore. You understand? So you always got to ask yourself, what is the intent fueling my ritualistic work when we're talking about rituals in transformation? Because they are connected. That's the purpose of a ritual. One should only partake in any ritual because there's some intent or some goal that's trying to be achieved behind it. That's it. Point blank.
When it is achieved?
Say it again?
When it is achieved?
Well, it may not be achieved on the first time, but you should always be going into it with the intent of achieving something to better yourself. So sometimes that might take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Some people lock in if they're doing a ritual for a specific intent. It might happen on the first or second time. It just all depends on, how you feel the intent.
But my question is when you achieved it.
Oh, when you achieve it.
Yeah.
Right.
What happens there? Because you were saying something in regards to
all right.
if you keep doing
That's
it.
a good question. If you achieve it, remember, it's like a car. Just because you buy a brand new car, right? It don't stay new all the time. You got to do the maintenance on it, right? You got to rotate the tires, change the oil, check the engine, whatever. So say you did a goal to, maybe there was a financial obstacle you were trying to overcome. Like say you were working a spiritual ritual because you needed to get a mortgage or get up an X amount of money to open paths to pay for a house in Kent, whatever. I'm just giving an example. I'm giving you something real simple. All right, say you got yourself out of the financial rut because you did the ritual, it opened up pathway. Now you still got to do the work. There's no fix all. What it does is it just creates the avenues that you need to actually do the work. All right, so you get yourself out of that. It doesn't mean that you're out of the clear and free. You've gotten to the point where now you're in a position where you're in control and you can maintain. So you're still going to have to do the maintenance on that particular situation. So it don't mean ritualistic work in that area is done. You never visit it again. It just means you've now gotten yourself in the position. So now when you see, say, similar scenarios coming, you see them coming, that means it's time to get back into the chamber and do some work. You understand? So it just means you've now gotten yourself to the point and you achieved, in a sense, you're in control. It's not controlling you no more. And that could apply, I'll just use the money thing as something basic. It could apply to maybe a bad habit you had. Maybe you're struggling with an addiction to food or alcohol or sex. You understand? And maybe you get yourself to the point where now you've freed yourself from the addiction. It don't mean you can't be susceptible to it again. It just means now you're in a higher state of awareness by the transformation process of the work you've done ritualistically. So now you're going to recognize it when it comes. Again, say you start slipping, right? We all slip. So say you start slipping back and regressing a bit into old ways. So now you're saying, okay, I recognize it. I'm not going to keep slipping and let it get out of hand. I'm going to go back and do what I need to do to discipline myself to stay in control, not be controlled, okay? Last thing, anybody in the back before we close out? I know you guys been silent, sitting back there all tough and shit like that. But, yeah, because we're at the 2-hour mark, and I like to keep this to 2 hours because I don't like to beat a dead horse and just overdo it, give people time to absorb. But good points by everybody. I enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it by sitting and listening to some of the things that you guys were saying. And that's pretty much it. But last thing before I go, we're not going to be here for much longer. We do have some books here. If you are interested, we'll be here not too much longer. You can take a brief look. And we do have a Square credit card machine, so we can take credit and debit cards if that's your only means.
The book you were reading from, do you have it?
I'm out of that one, but there's books that tie into it. This book, I'm in the process of getting some more of it. If you are and you don't want to wait, you can go on to Amazon and get it. It runs you about $12 to $15. We had a bunch, we sold them all. This class wasn't really prepared to do. It's something we put together last minute with Yehuda. I called him like 2 weeks ago, and it was a spur of the moment thing. So I'll make sure next time I come, I'll try to get some more. All right. Anyway, having said that, appreciate everybody for coming out. And I'll get with Yehuda the next time that we come here. All right.
Dr. Edward Bruce
Bynum, Dark Light Consciousness.
What is the name of that?